Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Friday, September 6, 2013. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. A lot of stuff going on here today. We're coming up on the anniversary of 9/11. Monday, Congress is supposed to reconvene. The Senate will vote on the Syrian war resolution. We're now hearing word coming through Ben Swan that the House may not even vote on the Syrian war resolution if they think it will go down to failure, and they don't want all those people who vote yes on it to face the wrath of we the people next election season. So they're just going to chicken out on that. It's very obvious that Obama's moving forward with the attack. Regardless of what Congress does, this whole government is operating outside the law. They're desperate to get this war going. From their point of view, the only way they can avoid this financial collapse of this Federal Reserve Ponzi scheme is to start another war. Why? Well, because it worked the last two times. You know, crash of can't even remember the years anymore. 1907, crash in 1907, World War I, crash in 1929, World War II, crash of 2008. We're on the doorstep of World War III. And it is a myth that war revives the economy, because all of that cash that's flowing around during the war, it's all borrowed at interest from those private central bankers. They're just in the back room with that little printing press cranking out the ink and paper. And they flood it on out there, and then subsequent generations have to sacrifice to pay it back, plus accruing interest. That's what's going on here. We see this repeating pattern over and over and over again. Bankers love wars. They make huge amounts, and they don't even care which side wins or loses. The bankers behind this push to war, they don't care that the United States is probably going to lose this one, because both sides go into debt to fight the war, and both sides go deeper into debt to rebuild from the war. That's the scam that's going on here. Now, as of the last tally, the Senate is close to being tied on the Syrian war resolution. A lot of people still claiming to be undecided. The House is hovering at the edge of a majority against. They're right at their 217, and there's 435 members in the House of Representatives by law. Now, there may be some people who aren't there, or they're waiting to be replaced or whatever. Some people are calling 217 a majority. It isn't quite technically, but it's within one or two votes of being the majority there. But we have to keep up the pressure intensely. You need to keep on going to these undecideds, and you send the message. How they vote on Syria determines how you will vote their next re-election. You need to go to the people who are standing firm against the war and support them and send in your compliments and praise. You need to keep up the pressure, because the side that quits first is going to lose. And yes, I understand that if the Congress votes down the war resolution, or if the House simply abandons the vote completely to save face, that Obama's going to go ahead with this thing, and Israel's probably going to gin up another false flag to get this thing going. But right now, the United States government stands exposed to the world as a criminal, tyrannical empire bent on conquest, and that stands there alone without the support of its erstwhile allies. It stands there alone without the support of the American people. By the way, we once again put up that link to the official U.S. military enlistment form at whatreallyhappened.com. You might want to copy that off and just send it in to all of these congressmen who are voting yes for war, or even the undecided ones, and saying, look, if you're going to vote for war for Syria, you lead it. You get out there on the front line. You get the rifle and the body armor and the rest of it, and you show us that you really mean that this war is necessary against Syria. And if you're too old or infirm, you send your own children first. Now, despite Boehner and Pelosi's assurances that this was going to be a vote of conscience, in other words, we will stand back and allow the members of Congress to decide for themselves, the pressure is on. AIPAC has just openly announced they're mounting a major lobbying blitz to get Congress to vote for this Syria strike plan. In fact, they're calling it, they're going all out. Everything they can do, all the bribes, blackmail, money, whatever they can do, wagging the Holocaust, they're down to that. This foreign policy lobby that serves the interests of a foreign government is inside the United States Congress as of Monday. selling this war with Syria. And by the way, the Russian delegation that is attempting to bring in evidence that it was the rebels behind this chemical weapon attack, they're not going to be allowed in. Every member of Congress they've approached about having some kind of a meeting has been rebuffed, and that is a major, major diplomatic slap in the face here. Now, if AIPAC thinks this war in Syria is a good idea, let's put them all on an airplane and fly them over to Syria. And we put up a couple of humorous polls at whatreallyhappened.com. Do you favor sending Congress to Syria? Overwhelming yes. Do you favor sending AIPAC to Syria? Overwhelming yes. Let's get all these people who are just screaming, we've got to have war with Syria, and say, fine, help yourself. Here's a rifle. Here's your parachute. Go on over and have all the fun that you want, but don't sit here safely in the United States heartland, in the capital, screaming that we have to send our children over to fight a war which is based on what we already know is a complete fabrication of a cause. And the government is now trapped by their illusion of infallibility. They can't back down and say, yeah, we were wrong, or be more honest and say, yeah, we were lying again. But they're really out there. Dianne Feinstein has asked the Central Intelligence Agency, which is not a recognized authority on anything scientific or factual. Their reputation is lies, cheats, thieves, deceivers. And they are producing for her a DVD to sell the idea that Assad was behind this chemical weapons attack. Now, this is the same CIA that cooked up that simulation, nudge, nudge, of TWA 800 zooming upwards without a nose, and after the point in time where the NTSB's own report said the wings had structurally failed. Now, this simulation by the CIA was so entirely bogus, Boeing publicly had to distance itself from it and say, we had nothing to do with this. Because everybody who understands aerodynamics was looking at that and saying, it's flat out impossible. So these are the people that Dianne Feinstein has gone to come up with a DVD to prove that Assad gassed his own people. And a DVD isn't proof. Anyone can make a DVD. I could make a DVD that will convincingly show those Syrian people were gassed by aliens from outer space. I'm pretty good at that sort of thing. I'm better than the CIA. And it's an even money bet right now that those of you listening to my words have already seen samples of my work on your TV sets and movie theater screens for the last 30 years. And again, the entire argument for war with Syria comes down to Assad being dumb enough to invite in UN's weapons inspectors, and then on the very day they arrive, launch a chemical weapon attack against women and children and his own soldiers. It's absurd on the face of it. And nobody can explain why Assad would have done something that stupid. All righty. We're going to take a phone call. Ryan Dawson is here on Skype. Ryan, thank you for joining us on the show today.
I'll tell you what, Mike, those AIPAC whores, they just might be a warmonger.
Yeah. Listen, I understand that's what you called in to do, but we're coming up on a commercial break, and I know you've got a very, very long list about that. And so what I'd like you to do is basically hold on that idea, and when we come back from this coming commercial break, I'm going to let you have the whole segment to go on there in your best Jeff Foxworthy accent.
Oh, I was just going to do a few, but I'll do that.
All right, because we're about 2 minutes away from the commercial break, and you can have that here. Other people actually ran polls asking, do you approve of sending Congress to Syria? Overwhelming yes. If you
The Onion did a piece in that.
Yeah, a lot of people did. We ran one on our website, and that's the attitude of the American people right now. If you want war with Syria, go help yourself. But don't sit here in safety telling me I got to send my kids over to attack Syria, especially on this nonsense piece of propaganda that just fell apart as soon as it was uttered. And it was insulting.
I think Herman Munster and Igor should go first, that old John Kerry and John McCain.
Oh, absolutely.
Stick them on a plane, John McCain can crash it, and then the Syrians can take care of them.
All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. America, welcome back to the show here. We've got Ryan Dawson on the line with You Might Be A Warmonger.
I don't know if I can do it in the same tone as Jeff Foxworthy, but I'll try just to be a bit more humorous. And I'd like to backtrack. When I said they could take John McCain and John Kerry and let McCain crash the plane, what we could also do is put them on an F-22, and it would crash by itself, and then they can land in Syria.
So would the F-35.
Yes, it would. But it would probably be knocked out before they landed. All right, let me do some of these then. So, okay. So, if you've ever repeated Fox News talking points like they was your own ideas, you might be a warmonger. If you learn what little geography you know based on the places your country has bombed, you might be a warmonger. If you've ever suggested our foreign policy should involve glass parking lots, you might be a warmonger. If you've a Made in China support the troops ribbon on the back of your SUV, but the only support the government used to give is to the government's decision to send them to war, you might be a warmonger. If you voted for any of the following, George Bush, John Kerry, John McCain, or Barack Obama, you might be a warmonger. If you think God is a real estate agent, you might be a warmonger. If you are impervious to logic, reason, and prudence, but are a constant sucker for scare tactics, you might be a warmonger. If you think supporting organ-eating Al-Qaeda terrorists is okay because the TV said so, you might be a warmonger. If you think we got attacked for our freedoms, you might be a warmonger. If you think Assad used chemical weapons in a war he was winning for no reason, you might be a warmonger. If you're dumb enough to have said or believe that war is good for the economy, you might be a warmonger. If you make excuses for your own country's use of biological, chemical, or nuclear weapons, you might be a warmonger. If you are in denial about America's use of biological, chemical, or nuclear warfare, you might be a warmonger. If you think brainlessly supporting war is synonymous with supporting America or being an American, you might be a warmonger. If you still think Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and that the government just can't tell us about it, you might be a warmonger. If you accept Obama's secret evidence accusing Assad of using chemical weapons, you might be a warmonger. If the Pentagon turns you on with its NATO weapons and you feel like a macho badass, you might be a warmonger. If you think justifying ethnic cleansing and torture and detention without trial are all okay because it's your team doing it, you might be a warmonger. I got more. I don't know if you still want to go with that, but so that's my sad Jeff Foxworthy accent. But.
Well, no, but the quality of the accent isn't there. I mean, the ideas you're putting out there are absolutely right. The United States government is a warmongering government right now. They have been to an extent all along. It's just that now the people of the world recognize it, the people of the United States recognize it, and it's all based on lies. I mean, even that one about how war is good for the economy, no, it isn't. It's great for the bankers because it forces everybody to just borrow and borrow and borrow, and then subsequent generations have to sacrifice and sacrifice to pay it all back plus accruing interest. It's just this huge, gigantic scam to keep the people of the world, including the people of the United States of America, economically enslaved to the private central bankers through this artificially created debt and an instilled belief that you must pay that debt no matter how it comes about. And they've been playing this for 100 years now. I mean, before the creation of the Federal Reserve, there was no such thing as a world war, and now we're into number 3 right now. We're into number 3.
They've really sold that to people, Mike. I hear all the time people saying, well, they're going to start another war because the economy's in bad shape and war's good for the economy. And I'm like, are you out of your mind?
No, it's...
War is horrible for the economy. A little certain sector profits a lot, but at the expense of everyone else, but they just don't get it.
Yeah, because it's the subsequent generations that pay the costs of that illusion of prosperity. We always see these little charts about, the economy's doing great during war. You need to look at the valleys following that war. It's just a way of robbing future generations for the present bankers today. And it's an absolute, complete lie. And the real danger we have here is, like I said before, the bankers don't care which side wins or loses because they make money off of both sides. The real danger...
They finance both sides.
They finance both sides. Brown Brothers Harriman in New York was financing Adolf Hitler's rise to power right up to the day the war broke out and Roosevelt nailed him under the Trading with the Enemies Act. And the reality here is that the United States is probably going to lose this one. I mean, we're already hearing over there in Syria where Russia has committed to aiding Syria if the U.S. attacks. China is now sending ships and Marines to the region. And, of course, we understand why the U.S. government wants war with China. The instant there's a war with China, they can just write off all that debt that they owe China. Say, books are zero. There's a good reason to lose a bunch of people. But the United States is already militarily exhausted. We have all these serving military who are going public saying we can't take on another war. We're out of supplies. We're out of equipment. We're just stretched way too thin. And now the U.S. government is going to march us into at least a proxy war with Russia and China. We're not going to win it. We're not the manufacturing power that we were in big mistake number one and big mistake number two. And that means somewhere between that first bomb falling on Syria and final capitulation by the United States government, they will resort to their nuclear weapons because that's what they did in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
they
why
almost
this
did in Korea also.
Yeah, they were seriously
very
planning
close.
on...
Yeah, I don't know if we're aware.
When Israel attacked the USS Liberty and tried to sink it, and they were framing Egypt for it, there was a nuclear-armed strike against Cairo being prepared, ready to go and level the place when the Liberty crew finally got the message out that, hey, these are Israelis shooting at us. So it's insane. But obviously the bright point in all of this is, judging by the huge public backlash, it is obvious the American people are now awake. They understand this government has been lying about Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, Syria's chemical weapons, and now they're starting to look around at other things the government has been lying about, like the ratification of the 16th Amendment. And
I think that's because of shows like yours, like tireless, effortless, just going on and on, explaining it to people. It's not working this time, and last time I checked, it was 25 to 82. With 82 no votes and 25 yes votes, and I know AIPAC's going to get in there and try and purchase as many votes as they can.
You're talking the Senate.
Yeah, well, no, in the House. There's a lot of them they haven't voted on it yet, but what they're promising and what they're saying on the Hill. The House committee was 10 to 7, just in the.
Yeah, that was the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Their vote really doesn't represent congressional approval. They're trying to sell it as that. The last numbers I had is the Senate was basically balanced at 23-23. The numbers I'm looking at here is 217 in the House say they're going to be voting no, and I forget how many are voting yes. But it's edging very much to defeat. But you're right. AIPAC has just openly announced that we're starting a full court press. We're going to go up there and we're going to force the U.S. Congress to go for this war, even against the wishes of the American people, which tells us that AIPAC is all about hijacking the U.S. government and using your children and your money to get these wars going, even though you, the American people, are absolutely opposed to it. But again,
this is an unregistered foreign lobby that can get money from his state to help it with its bribery, and the last person to go after him with that was Robert Kennedy. Someone shot him.
They're the only foreign policy lobby that is not regulated in this country. Everybody else's foreign policy lobby, they're registered, they're regulated, they're watched, their activities are limited. But AIPAC just has open season on the U.S. Congress. We have to take a break for commercials. Ryan, do you want to stay on for another segment, or you got to head off and get some sleep?
I would like to stay on, but I got to head out.
All right, well then, thank you very much for You Might Be a Warmonger, and we'll be back after these commercials. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phone. Scott in Wisconsin. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. How you doing, bud? Mike, I totally agree with you that this situation is, but I wanted to give you a couple things, and then I'll finish off what I believe that will take place over there. I just found out today that those 5 destroyers that they have over there have over 200 Tomahawk missiles together on them. And you were talking about a price of just one.
Yeah.
I can confirm that the Nimitz, I think you were talking about this in the past, that the Nimitz was supposed to be coming back home for relief. Well, let me tell you something. It didn't. It's in the Red Sea right now, sitting with its destroyers.
Yeah, there are 2 carriers in the region now.
I want this war here. You won't have time to put boots on the ground. This war will be over early because they are going to use heavy power from both sides. And when when the smoke clears from the heavens, Mike, there'll probably be 200 miles of blood on each side of Israel. This is the magnitude of this war. And you can call in and say, and we're a warmonger and that, but you better take heed, because I'll tell you right now, if that goes through over there, which I believe it will because it's in the scripture, there'll be smoke to the heavens and there'll be bloodshed so far on each side of Israel. This isn't funny. So thank you for taking my call. If you'd like to comment on that, I appreciate it. Take care.
All right. Well, yes, the Nimitz is in the area. There's one other carrier joining the area. There's a Marine landing ship that is taking up position. One of the guided missile destroyers has actually been rotated out because it was at the end of its tour, but they've got 4 in there now. Plus, they have a submarine, probably more than that, but they have a submarine that's called an arsenal ship. This is one of the old SSBN nuclear ballistic missile submarines. It's been taken out of nuclear service because of treaty limitations, and what they do is they take out the big Trident nuclear missiles, and in those tubes they put a little multi-cell launcher for Tomahawks or Standards. 7 of these missiles go inside a single tube for the Trident, and so it's 24 times 7 is how many rockets this submarine can carry and deploy, and it's just a massive, massive amount of ordnance. The Tomahawks can carry nuclear warheads, and it is a huge amount of force. The problem is, I don't think it's going to be a slam dunk, because Russia and China have already said they're drawing a line in the sand, and they're sending in their latest weapons to Syria right now to be on position, and that includes some sea-skimming anti-ship cruise missiles, which are frankly going to be very, very difficult to defend against by the U.S. forces. In particular, the Yakontz, which flies at Mach 2.8. It maneuvers to foil a ballistic prediction of where it's going to go, and its radar is sophisticated enough to pick the carrier out of the middle of a carrier battle group and go for it. So the U.S. has been spending all this money on all of these huge weapon systems. The Russians are not spending as much money, but they're spending it smarter, because the Yakontz is less expensive than a fighter jet. It's less expensive than a Russian fighter jet, and way less expensive than a U.S. fighter jet like the F-22 or the F-35. So this may not be the slam dunk. And there's a very interesting story here. In fact, this is a good time to come on down to it. Do you remember back in, let me see if I can find this because it's way down. Here we go. Now, General Martin Dempsey is warning not to go to war in Syria, that the U.S. is not actually ready to take this on, especially with Russia and China coming in on the other side. McCain is out there calling Dempsey disingenuous, and it reminds us all very much of this story that happened going into the war with Iraq. And Shinseki, General Eric Shinseki, said, you're not going to get Iraq without several 100,000 troops on the ground. And, of course, he was declared, oh, you're widely off the mark. This is going to be easy. They're going to be welcoming us with open arms and flowers. And Shinseki was basically forced out. And, of course, in the aftermath of the invasion of Iraq, it turned out Shinseki had an accurate view of what it was going to be. We've been hearing all over the place about how easy this will be. You know, the other Arab nations are going to pay for it. It's not going to cost the taxpayers anything. That's nonsense. They were saying the same thing about Iraq, about how Iraq's oil revenue was going to pay the costs of the invasion and the reconstruction. Of course, all of Iraq's oil money can't bring back all of our kids who got killed in that, but this is part of this. Let's go ahead with this war. It's going to be easy. It'll be over with really, really quickly. Obama, when he was having his little speech at the White House, was saying no boots on the ground, limited strike. Now we're hearing that the White House is ordering the Pentagon to greatly expand the list of targets. The new term is force suppression. They're basically going to go in and try and smash all of Syria's military in order to allow the hired mercenaries a chance to sort of come back, pretend to be a revolution, and topple Assad. But the real prize behind that is Iran, because of the massive public backlash and denunciation of this latest lie to start a war. The war planners understand that their previous policy of we'll invade this country, wait a few months for everybody to calm down, invade this country, wait a few months for everybody to calm down, and invade another country and wait a few months for everybody to calm down isn't going to work any longer. They were not able to sell the lie about Syria. They understand now there's no way they're going to sell a lie about Iran, unless they back it up with a false flag like a nuclear bomb in Charleston or something like that. And so it appears to me, from the amount of force that's going in there and the fact that the U.S. is now ordering their diplomatic personnel out of Lebanon and Turkey, that they're just going to go for the whole thing. They're going to go for the end of this plan to bring the world back to the petrodollar and Bretton Woods. This is it. This is the beginning of the real World War III. And that's why it is so important for us to do everything we can to resist, refuse, defund, whatever it takes to stop this insanity, because this country is going to lose this war. And they're moving forward with it because the bankers who are behind all these wars, they don't care which side wins or loses. Now, getting back to the Congress, Representative Justin Amash is basically saying that if you vote for the Syria attack, you might as well start cleaning out your office because of the anger of the American people. And I'm sure AIPAC is in there saying, don't worry, we'll make sure the media, supports you in your next election. We'll give you tons of money to campaign on. We'll get the vote riggers to make sure your job is secure. But this is a fist fight on Capitol Hill. And you have to get in there and you have to keep fighting. You have to make the members of Congress more worried about you, the angry American voter, than they are about AIPAC and military defense contractor lobbying. And the other side is pushing really hard. There was an article I posted to whatreallyhappened.com from somebody who recorded their calls to their congressional offices. And they were talking to the staffers in the office. And the staffers in the office confirmed that their congressman knows the war against Syria is illegal under international law. They agree it looks like the rebels committed the chemical attack, but the congressman is still undecided, which means he's waiting to see who's going to come in with a bribe that's sufficient enough for him to risk losing his next election. The Congress is no longer the representative of the American people. The House of Representatives, that's why it's in their name. They're supposed to be representative of the people, and they clearly are not. On this one point alone, the government it's illegitimate. It's not a legal government of this land. They're outside the Constitution. They're outside international law. They've gone rogue. All of us have to stand up and say, I do not recognize this government as being an authority over me. I withdraw my consent to your powers. I don't recognize your authority. Yes, they can kick down the door and shoot me. But I am not their slave any longer. I won't be. I can't in good conscience here. Phone calls to Congress are still running about 500 to 1 against the Syria war, and that's with all the seminar callers and phone banks and everything that AIPAC and everybody can come up with here. Let's see. Going to grab a couple of phone calls here. One call before the break. Winds of Time in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, sir, Mr. Rivero. I have about 6 points to make, so would you like me to wait till after your break?
Well, why don't you make well, yeah, we're coming up on the break here right now, so just hang on. We're going to start a commercial break, and when you come back, we'll hit your 6 points of war and the rest of the phone calls. By the way, a reminder to everybody, Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 of our broadcast today. I know you've been waiting for her to come back. Claire returns. The return, oh, Claire. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to Winds of Time, and you had some points you wanted to make.
Yes, sir. First, I would like to ask the people, I'm not a computer wizard, but there are smart people out there that we need to help Mr. and Mrs. Rivero with this corrupt government and IRS situation, so let's do what we can. To my points. First, Miss Claire, your video, very well done and beautiful music. To the United States federal government and corrupt cronies say that there's not enough money for Hurricane Sandy victims, who it seems have been forgotten, but yet there's plenty of money for these people to invade, murder, and enslave other countries for the murderous bankers. J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and the list goes on. Any elected officials that vote to go into Syria is a traitor to our country and our people. 3, H.R. 5736. The U.S. Congress and Senate, along with the corrupt regime of Obama, repealed the propaganda law that was put in 1947 to protect the American people from the lies of the United States government. They only repealed this law so the terrorist government can lie to all of us legally. Or the nuclear missiles that have gone missing out of Texas, They were removed without proper authorization. We, the people, need to stay frosty, my friends. They are going to false flag us in a very bad way. And Senator, the traitor, Mr. Graham, has announced to the people that the government is going to do it. That's how he's got the inside information. The rumors of Saudi Arabia willing to pay for the war in Syria reminds me of the War of 1812 and the Rothschilds willing to pay England's war bill to go to war with the U.S. again because the Patriot government kicked out the murdering, thieving central banks. Something to think about, because I don't recall anything in our Constitution about being murdering mercenaries for hire for any country or any corrupt central banks anywhere. I'm a patriot to the Constitution our forefathers gave us all to protect we the people from this very thing that's happening right now. My loyalty is to my country, my Constitution, and all the children. Obama, you and this corrupt and traitorous government crossed my constitutional red line long ago. I have no loyalties to a corrupt, murdering government of traitors. Country, Constitution, and children is who I die for, not you. Our country was founded upon the 3 C's, country, Constitution, and citizens. I die free. Everyone, please do all we can to support Mr. Rivero, he echoes our forefathers' anger. Live well, my friends. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. You raised some very, very good points indeed. I feel much the same way. Longtime listeners and readers know that I have been counseling patience, because the system is on the verge of coming down. But I understand the anger. And, yes, for me, this government crossed the constitutional red line a long, long time ago. In fact, before I was born, 100 years ago. 100 years ago, when they did an end run around the Constitution to create the third bank of the United States, also known as the Federal Reserve. They lied to us about the ratification of the 16th Amendment. And again, going from the public backlash against this total bovine excrement about Assad using chemical weapons on his own people, it is clear that the American people now understand and accept this government lies to us to get its way. And they are ready to hear about how the government lied about other things like 9/11, we're coming up on that anniversary, how they lied to us about the ratification of the 16th Amendment. And even if the amendment had been ratified, the Supreme Court said it did not actually create any new taxing authority because the earlier constitutional prohibitions were still in effect. They were not explicitly repealed. And it goes on and on and on. We are the most lied to people on the face of the earth. And it was okay to go along with the lies when it looked like maybe this government financial system were somehow taking care of this country. But look around you right now and ask yourself, is this government and financial system serving the nation and its people? And the answer is very obviously no. And I am 100% in agreement. I don't recognize this government as legitimate. I don't recognize its authority. I understand it's got the ability to come out and start killing Americans left and right to try and scare us back into obedience, but that's not legitimate government either. And I know you're angry, and I'm just as angry as you are, because it looks to me like no matter what Congress does, the war party wants this war because they think it's going to resolve all of the economic problems coming out of this Ponzi scheme private central bank. Well, if we're going to have a war, I say it is our inalienable right to choose our own enemies. And the enemy of the American people isn't Syria. It isn't Iran. It wasn't Iraq. It wasn't Afghanistan. It is the private central banks issuing the public currency as a loan at interest in order to trap us in permanent, unpayable debt to keep us their slaves. We've had 100 years of this fiscal slavery in this country. 100 years is way too much. This war will not fix anything for the American people. It will shackle us to even more trillions of dollars of unpayable debt. There is no amount of work and sacrifice that the American people can endure that will improve life in this country for ordinary Americans. And that is just the bottom line on all of this stuff here. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, we have one other caller. Rick in Michigan, thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
I heard about your IRS trouble. I congratulate you for going public, because I think everybody needs to go public. When they get threatened by authority and stuff like that, the best thing to go is public. because then the people that want to help you can help you and don't wonder what's going on with you. You know what I mean? That will prevent everybody from making up stories if something does go wrong. But I don't think it will, Mike. We're all with you. This Syria war thing is the latest example of the American people really falling down on the job. Now we're waking up a little bit. The alternative media has been on fire for years, but the regular people are just starting to get it now. I see a huge opening. Yes. I'm highly encouraged. I'm heading to New York, Mike. I'll be down at the Today Show Monday morning outside. I got a sign. I got 3 Jack Russells, and they'll have LED flashing lights on. We're going to get some attention paid to the fact that the American people don't want a war in Syria. I would encourage anyone else that is around the area, come on down there with me. Let's all stand together and, raise a little bit of hell in a peaceful manner. I'm also going down there to all the events in New York City for 9/11. It is my issue. I knew day one it was a lie. When I saw that South Tower explode, and then I heard bin Laden, that was the key right there, because there was information out there. I mean, I was awake too, Mike, at the time, and there was information out there that, a false flag attack could be coming. I believe it was Bill Cooper who named it. I mean, he called it, and I heard the replay of his June 28th show in early August of 2001. And what he said is, whatever bin Laden's going to do, and they blame it on him, don't you believe it for a minute. And when I saw that South Tower go down, those words came into my head. And I've been doing a lot of research since, and I've stayed away from the truth movement and everything. But last year when I went down there, Mike, it was pathetic. There was no showing down there at all, and people were mocking the people that were there. And, I'm involved this year because we need to bring this back to a one common point. We need a new investigation.
I don't need a new investigation. I mean, I no longer recognize this government as having any legitimacy at all, and I'm certainly not going to cede to them the power and authority to tell me what to think. I know we were lied to, and that's all we need to be aware of right now. We were lied to about 9/11. We were lied to about Saddam's nuclear weapons. We're being lied to about Assad's chemical weapons. It's just lie after lie after lie after lie. And how long are you going to sit there and let your life be ruled by lies? Your wealth looted with lies, your children sent off to be killed and crippled with lies. When do you stand up and say enough? I am not going to let the next generation of Americans grow up in this cesspool. I think I can say that without the FCC getting on my case. But that's really...
I agree totally with you, Mike.
Yeah.
I agree totally with you. When does this end? It ends when we stand up together.
That's exactly right.
What do we all agree on? Let's go for a moral point of view here. What's right and wrong? That's easy enough. That's not political at all. So, I mean, when people want to get together in a moral fashion, something will happen. But people don't want to do that because we all want to make money.
Okay, we got to let you go.
Sacrifice.
I'm sorry I had to cut you off. We got to take a break for Phyllis Shapley and commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I think most Americans have reached the point of realizing we really don't have much left to lose in deciding what we're going to do about the obviously illegitimate, unconstitutional government that is looting us to pay for these wars of conquest to balance the most sacrosanct and holy ledgers on Wall Street. You got John McCain and Lindsey Graham out there ready to spend billions of dollars invading Syria. Billions, trillions more invading Iran and going to war against Russia and China, but, taking care of those Hurricane Sandy victims here in the United States of America, that was too expensive. Couldn't vote for that. Way too costly. The federal government isn't interested in taking care of you. They're only interested in your children to the extent that they can be used for military ventures. They're not taking care of our infrastructure. They're not doing the job government is supposed to do. The proper function of government is to do for the community and the nation what the community and the nation needs but cannot do for themselves. This fraudulent government and fraudulent banking system is usurping the wealth of the American people and spending it on whatever they want to do. And there's nothing new about that. The government of Britain did the same thing to the colonies. That's why it's written into that Declaration of Independence. When a long train of abuses and usurpations Taking the money of the people and spending it on something other than the people is usurpation. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, we're getting this from Ben Swan, that National Review Online is reporting that the House may not bring the Syrian war resolution to a vote. If they don't know for certain it will pass. Because if they vote for it and it loses, that's another hit against the war agenda. And worse, everybody who voted for that war resolution will be on record as having done so and will be facing the wrath of angry voters. We're going to go back to the phones here. John in Barbados. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I agree with much of what you say. In fact, all of what you say. However, I think we need to open this up to a wider resistance. For example, go on a tax strike. Take away their money. Pull your money out of the banks, all of it. Sell your stocks and keep the cash at home. And it's not just America. It's not just Congress critters. It's MPs, France, Britain, you name it. Really hit them hard. A multi-pronged attack against these warmongers.
We do. Now's the time for resistance and non-cooperation here. The problem with pulling your money out of the banks and trying to defund them is it doesn't work as long as they have printing presses. Because that's the whole problem with it. The government will just go on having the Federal Reserve print up new money that they will spend on their wars, and then our future generations will be forced to pay it back with their labor, their slave labor. And that's why the whole thing has to stop. The whole thing has to come to an end right now. Or if we don't do it,
in the precarious financial position of some of these banks and governments, I mean, this could be a significant blow to their Ponzi scheme.
Well, they're already in trouble. That's why the Federal Reserve is printing up $85 billion a month to pour all over America's largest banking industries, because without that injection, they would have collapsed already. They're being propped up by all this instantly created money, all of it considered a loan to the American people to be repaid by the slave labor of future generations.
I agree to a certain extent, but I think it will give such a shock to the markets, particularly if people just sell all their stocks and keep it in cash in their homes, because we don't want to put it in the bank because they'll just steal it, as they did in Cyprus.
Yes.
It's with this precarious position, and where all the nations, the warmongers, are reaching the limit of their respectability, and people just don't trust the banks anymore. People don't trust the nation's treasuries anymore.
They have ample reason.
Absolutely.
I mean, we know that the New York Federal Reserve has been playing fast and loose with other countries' gold bullion. We learned that when Germany wanted to repatriate their gold, and both the New York Federal Reserve and the Bank of France said, it's going to take a few years, and then they promptly invaded Mali, which is Africa's third largest gold producer. It doesn't get more obvious than that. The United States is getting ready to go to war against the world, to conquer the nations whose resources they can use to sort of prop the American financial system up. And they want to go to war against China, because then they can say, oh, we're at war. We don't owe you all that money that we borrowed from you before. But, zero out the bank account on that. And they're risking a nuclear war with that, because China has nuclear weapons and the missiles to deliver them. But to these bankers, they don't care. They want their little money system to work out. They want to go on believing that this is somehow right and good, and they're risking the surface of planet Earth to do it. That's how insane all of this is. But we know from World War I and World War II, these private central bankers have absolutely no qualms about sending hundreds of millions of human beings to death and disfigurement to keep that little Ponzi scheme bank scam going. They've been doing it for hundreds and hundreds of years now, and they keep getting away with it. And as long as we have let me finish this. As long as we have these private central banks hijacking the monetary system of nations, we will always have wars. Because war is the inevitable end of this pileup of debt faster than money.
I have a new definition of warhead. Those who believe invading Syria and bombing Syria is a good idea are Finheads, Talmud heads, Richard heads. These are the people.
Yeah,
that's the new warhead.
Yeah, we're at the point right now. I mean, you know, in the United States here, the wealth inequality is far more severe than it was in Egypt when they had their first revolution, which is unfortunately, sadly, being reversed, you know, to get Mubarak's government back into power. Although, interestingly enough, the attack on Syria may halt that, because all of a sudden the new government of Egypt and the people of Egypt are all saying, yeah, we're united in opposing the U.S. strike into Syria. We've got Egyptians going over to Syria to act as human shields around some targets. This push into Syria is literally isolating the United States on the world stage. Britain is out. Now Holland has backed off and saying, yeah, this is a really, really bad idea to move forward on this. Because they're all realizing that this attempt to bamboozle the people of the world, that this war is right, moral, and just, has absolutely cratered. The United States government... Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think Mr. Putin has shown his skill yet again. He waited until a reporter asked him a question, and then out over all the major news media went his views, and people should look it up. He was really smart. He said, you know, this invasion is an illusion based on John Kerry lies and what have you, and he will support Syria.
Yes, he will.
Of course, that would have been that wouldn't have been published in the mainstream media if he'd said it without being asked the question. But all the microphones were open because the reporter had asked him the question.
Yeah, Putin is playing this very, very smart, and I love the way he put Obama on the spot by saying, what are you going to do if it turns out the rebels were behind the chemical attack, which they were behind the attack last March that they tried to frame on Assad, and that one fell apart. You know, are you going to start bombing the rebels? Are you going to stop sending arms to the rebels? And, of course, Obama had no answer for that. Because the goal here is war with Syria and Iran and every place else on planet Earth that have resources for sale for currencies other than the dollar, to force private central banking onto those countries. Again, looking at the IMF and World Bank's websites, Syria doesn't owe them any money. So, of course, we have to invade and plunge them into debt. That's what this is all about. Keeping us debt slaves to the private central banks. We'll be back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones. Kyle in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Kyle. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. First, I think what you said was pretty profound about the American people now have nothing left to lose. Because I think for about the past 5 to 6 years, there's been kind of this mentality in Americans that, okay, I'll let my government do what they're going to do, even though I might not agree with it. Just let me keep my house. Let me keep my job. Let me keep my family. And now that's gone. People don't have that anymore. So I think that was a pretty profound statement on your end. I also think that the government only has two plays. One of the plays is obviously pull up a large false flag attack, blame it on Syria, and, you know, try to ram in the war that way. The other one is have a shooting, have a Sandy Hook, have an Aurora, Colorado, have that take over the headlines of the news, and then somehow sneak in the vote under the cover of a larger news story that might not have anything to do with Syria.
Not sure how that's... I'm not sure I understood exactly what you were saying there. Would you repeat that one more time?
Well, yeah, if there was an Aurora shooting, or if there was a Sandy Hook shooting, and something that dominated the headlines, something that was on, all the news stories and everything like that, and for the next 5 to 7 days took Syria off of the front of everybody's mind.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Tuesday or Wednesday, maybe you slip in the vote very casually and hope that no one notices that you're doing it.
Well, that's certainly a tactic they've used many, many times before. I mean, when back in 2001, when the U.S. was already informing other nations of the coming attack on Afghanistan, here in the U.S. all we got was Gary Condit and Chandra Levy all the time. And they may very well try and do that again now, except it's not going to work. Because right now, this idea of a new war based on a lie Everybody I've talked to, just walking around, going to the stores, all the rest of that is just, they're saying, that's all they're talking about. And so what can they, another Sandy Hook shooting is not, it's not even going to register on the radar.
Well, and I completely agree. You can feel the tension in the air. You can cut it with a knife. It almost feels like, something is going to happen, one way or another. And it's a very, very tense moment. The only thing I could possibly compare it to, even though I wasn't around, would be the Bay of Pigs.
I think there's going to be a false flag. Israel already tried that on Tuesday by firing those missiles towards Syria. They were hoping to spook Assad into an overt military act against the U.S. warships. That failed, fortunately. Assad didn't fall for it. Israel could fire torpedoes or cruise missiles at the U.S. warships. They could dump sarin gas someplace in Britain or the United States and say, see, Assad is using sarin gas against us. They could even set off a nuclear weapon and say, oh, Iran does have nuclear weapons, gave it to Syria. They're desperate to get this thing going. And we know already they're perfectly capable and willing of using false flags to get us into war. It has been a constant feature of history. The difference is that now the people of planet Earth understand this is how wars get started. Back when Hitler did the Reichstag fire and Gleiwitz, the German people had no idea governments could be that evil. Today we know better. We know that this is how wars do get started. It's not a rare event. It's business as usual.
Well, and consequently, a false flag attack is the only play, and it's also going to be the least effective event in history.
Okay, your phone connection is starting to degrade, so I'm going to let you go here. We've got another caller on the line. Wayne in North Carolina. Aloha, Wayne. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
You're welcome, Mike. I have a question. It seems to me like people I talk to seem to think that if we go to war with Syria, that it's going to be like pretty much an invasion of Libya. And my question, and I keep telling people this, is that I don't think Russia and China is going to sit down and try to shoot out ships out the water. They're going to attack this country. Mm-hmm. I mean, it just makes sense to me for them to do that. And what is your take on that?
Well, I think at this point it's very clear. China and Russia have explicitly stated they are going to come into this war on the side of Syria. Iran says they're going to come into the war on the side of Syria. They have a mutual defense pact. They do honor their treaty obligations. And, of course, in terms of Iran, that's what the United States wants. The instant there's an overt action by Iran, the U.S. is going to say, we're into Iran, which is what they've been trying to get into since, 2003, 2005. Iran was always going to be the end of this dollarification program. The reason we're so dangerous right now is the U.S. has succeeded in conquering pretty much all of the nations that were on that list that General Wesley Clark blew the whistle on. And they feel they're so close to success and we're so close to getting Iran, and that's why they're tempted into this extraordinarily reckless behavior. But there is absolutely no question Russia and China are drawing a line in the sand. Russia's made that very clear. Russia has warships in the region. China is sending warships to the region. This is not going to be a new Iraq. It's not going to be a new Afghanistan. It's not going to be a new Libya. It is going to be a major, major all-out conflict in the eastern Mediterranean. And the latest, newest Russian weapons are able to evade the U.S. defenses deployed to the fleet.
But do you think it's just contained to that area? Well, I guess what I'm thinking is that it's not going to be contained to the Middle East. It's going to come here.
It very well could, because, again, I don't think the United States can prevail in a conventional war against Russia and China, especially if they're coming into this thing together, and that means the U.S. is going to resort to their nuclear weapons.
One other thing I remember, I can't remember the exact details, but wasn't there a Russian sub found pretty close to the American shore, I guess maybe 6 months or a year ago?
Yeah, they found it in the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay. And so, I'm thinking, that's why it's not going to be contained just to the Middle East. It doesn't make sense to me for them to try to find it there when they can fight it here.
Well, I'll tell you right now what I think is going to happen, and this is based on an extrapolation of Russia's strategic thinking with regard to these sea-skimming cruise missiles. They understand that they're not going to match the U.S. weapon for weapon, so they're focusing their effort on how to get at the key assets. And if this thing goes to missiles and nuclear, I think Russia's going to go for decapitation strikes. I would suspect they've already worked out ways to find out where NECAP and the TACAMO planes are. And, I expect probably right about now they're already repainting those airborne command posts to look like commercial passenger jets, Fly United or whatever. But Russia's going to go for that, or they're going to go for those satellite systems that link the airborne command posts to the weapons systems. Russia is playing this very clever. The U.S. is simply throwing money into the fire and saying this gives us the advantage, and I'm not sure that can be relied on, because other countries are spending less money, but they're spending it very smartly, and they're getting far more bang for their buck than the U.S. is with all of these boondoggle projects like the F-35.
Well, thanks a lot, Mike. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
All righty, I mentioned this earlier. Obama is ordering the Pentagon to expand the list of potential targets in Syria with a focus on force degradation. In other words, for all this talk about going after the chemical weapons and removing his ability to use chemical weapons, they're going after Syria's military. They want to smash it so that the hired mercenaries can then continue on with their little program of overthrowing Assad on behalf of their American and Israeli masters. Article we're seeing over at Strat risks that the U.S. already has military forces well within range for the Syria strike. I think they're going to move ahead with this thing as fast as they can, because they know now they're not going to get this resolution through the Congress. Probably they're going to wait till next week and give AIPAC a chance to go in there and twist some arms. But as it stands right now, we've got the House talking about not even bringing it to a vote because of the potential embarrassment. We're going to take a break. Welcome back to the show. And before I take these phone calls who are waiting here, it is very obvious that the propaganda campaign against Iran is ramping up. Fox News was just showing Iran vows retaliation against Israel in event of Syrian attack. And they had a crowd of people waving absolutely matching identical flags, which tells you right there and then it's a bought and paid for crowd. We have another article over at RINF.com. Propaganda war against Iran begins ahead of Syria attack. The establishment media is now targeting Iran, claiming the Islamic Republic will stage terror attacks in the United States after the United States attacks Syria. So they're already building the case to expand this from Syria into Iran. They are going to set fire to the world to prop up this little Ponzi banking scam. Beam me up, Scotty. There's no intelligent life here. Two more stories before we go to the phone call, because I want to get into this kind of a lead into the economy, because we got to talk about the economy. The numbers are not good there either. We talked about this yesterday. Peter Morici put up an article saying peace with Syria will crash the U.S. economy. We had this other article. This was over at Yahoo Finance. It was written by Peter. Yeah, it's the same guy. It's just been picked up in a couple of different places. The Syrian strike will threaten the economic recovery, which is nonsense. But more than that, it basically underscores this push for war is all about banking and money. That's what it's about. Okay, back to the phones. Wayne in North Carolina. Aloha, Wayne. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Wayne, are you there? Okay, well, let's switch over to Jim in New Jersey. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Mahalo. It's time for everybody to reread Smedley Butler's 1935 book, War is a Racket. Smedley Butler was one of only 19 men from the United States Marine Corps in our entire history to win 2 Medals of Honor. And he, his comment is really, the title of his book is self-explanatory. And if you look at our history, you made it, it might have been you who made the statement earlier on that we're the most lied to people on the planet. Maybe one of your listeners who called in. And this is actually true. I mean, let's go back to 1898, the alleged blowing up of the Maine in Havana. becomes the excuse for the Spanish-American War. World War I, the Lusitania. Well, no. The Lusitania occurred in 1915. We didn't declare war until almost the end of World War I, and it was because we were getting some of our supply ships sunk by the German Navy. World War II, there's enough information about what Franklin Roosevelt and then Secretary of State knew about the approaching attack on Japan. Let's see. I'm a Vietnam veteran myself. Tonkin Gulf, we were lied to. They gave us, reasons to go to fight, and we made up our reasons as to why we should go. And listen, I'm not fighting another man's war ever again.
No, we can't. We can't. Look at all the Americans who have died in what they thought were wars for noble causes.
Oh, yeah.
And we look back and realize they were just chips being thrown away in this big economic game across the globe. And for those of you who don't know, Major General Smedley Butler is also famous for having blown the whistle on an attempt by the Wall Street bankers to stage a coup d'etat against Franklin Roosevelt in order to bring about a fascist dictatorship.
Fascist government, right.
Yeah, which apparently they've now succeeded in doing through more covert and gradual means. But Smedley Butler pretended to go along with the bankers and blew the whistle on them. It was all hushed up and covered up. And that's the actual historical basis for the book and movie 7 Days in May, although the banker element of that was taken out, and the Smedley Butler character was portrayed as the villain.
Or sort of, yeah. But, Smedley Butler said that all he was a racketeer for the racket of war.
That's
and
exactly right.
And young men and women who have volunteered for service, thinking that they're fighting for a noble cause, their awakening will be rude, and it will come.
Well, the awakening is there. We're seeing all these people who are posting pictures of themselves. They're in their dress uniform with the sign in front of their face so they can't be recognized and retaliated against, saying, this is not what I signed up for.
Right, absolutely right. Well, you're doing good work there on getting this message out, and more people need to hear it.
Well, thank you very much here. We're going to let you go. We're coming up on the top of the hour when Claire is going to join us. I'm going to hit a couple of real fast headlines because I really want to get into the economic news because the numbers are not good there. Iran saying they will support Syria to the end. China sending warships and 1,000 Marines to Syria. China is now openly saying the U.S. is lying to start this war. Russia is warning that U.S. strikes on Syria's nuclear facilities could result in a radiological disaster across Syria, similar to what happened in Chernobyl. And again, Iran, they're already cranking up the propaganda. Ooh, Iran, they're threatening Israel. Iran is bad. Iran is going to do terror attacks in the United States after the Syria attack. Okay, good. Don't attack Syria. That's the solution. But they're ramping up this idea that we've got, they're already pre-selling this idea that we're going to have to go into Iran here. Now, there are some people in the corporate media who are beginning to stand up to the obvious fallacy of this whole cause for the attack on Syria, and they're beginning to question John Kerry's claiming that 1,400 people died in this chemical attack, 400 of whom were children, because nobody can verify that. They don't know where he got the numbers. The people who were there on the ground had much fewer numbers of victims of this attack here. Now, another mainstay of the government case against Syria is, we know it was Assad by default because the Syrian rebels don't have access to chemical weapons, and that's an absolute, complete fraud because we have linked to dozens of articles about how the rebels are getting sarin through Turkey, about how the rebels took control of a chlorine facility to make chlorine gas. Even the United Nations last March said it was the rebels using chemical weapons. So it's nonsense to say that since the rebels don't have chemical weapons, by default it had to be Assad. They're just piling on the bovine excrement higher and higher and higher in the hope that the overwhelming size of it will awe you into obedience and belief, and it's not working. Now, I'm not the only person out there concerned that the U.S. is getting desperate enough to try a false flag attack. There's another article over at Americans Journey blogspot saying the globalists and bankers got to have their war, and if they can't get it under the illusion of some kind of legitimacy and legality, they will fake an attack against the United States or the U.S. forces or Britain or whoever it takes to say, see, they attacked us first. But I want you to think about something very, very carefully. Right now in Syria, Assad is getting what he wants. What he wants is to not have the U.S. directly invade in support of the hired mercenaries. And he's already getting that. It looks to go down to defeat in the House of Representatives. So why would Assad carry out a chemical weapon attack inside the United States or attack the U.S. warships knowing that would greenlight an immediate American invasion? He's not going to do it. Somebody's going to do it and blame it on him, probably Israel. And again, last Tuesday, Israel fired those missiles towards Syria, hoping to spook Assad into taking an overt military action against the U.S. warships. It was not a test. Israel says it was a test, but Israel lies about everything anyway. When you test a missile, you issue a warning ahead of time to give civilian traffic time to get out of the area in case there's an accident, which happens a lot with tests. This was Israel playing the usual Israeli games of trying to start a war between the United States and somebody else. They did it. They tried it with the Levant affair, failed, thankfully. They tried it with the USS Liberty, failed, thankfully. I'm convinced Israel was behind the attack on the USS Cole, and we all know Israel was very much involved with 9/11. This is what they do, and it is time for it to stop. We're going to grab a phone call before the commercial break. Kathleen in Utah. Aloha, Kathleen. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Thank you for all you do.
Yes?
Anyway, I just wanted to bring up a point that you made in the video on all wars or banker wars.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned in there that the first method was to get the money out of the people. And then the second method was to have the government pay for all this, like Bernanke has done with the QA, QE, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
That's not exactly what I said. Let me clarify. But
okay.
Actually, we're coming up on a commercial break. I'm going to have to let you go. But when we come back from the commercial break, I will tell you this horrible three-step process that inevitably leads from private central banks to global wars. Aloha, America. Right. Welcome back to the show. And the corporate media is promoting the fact that Obama will address the nation on Tuesday night. And it's going to be another sales pitch. We got to go to war in Syria. Really, we've got to do this. We just have to because we have to. And he's going to. They're using a snowblower to fling that bovine excrement at us, and nobody is buying it. I'm seeing all these articles from Republicans saying everywhere they go, people are saying no, 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 heck no, darn no, no. What part of no do you not get? Because if you, the House of Representatives, are not going to represent the American people, then you're out of a job. Because that is your job. Not to represent AIPAC or Israel or the military-industrial complex or fall for this lie that a war is going to somehow be good for the economy. Because it isn't. It piles up a bunch of money over the war, and then future generations have to struggle and sacrifice to pay it all back, plus accruing interest. Now, in response to Kathleen's call, what I described is this three-step process that inevitably leads from private central banking to war. When a private central bank takes control of the nation's monetary system, from that point on, all the currency in circulation is a loan at interest to that private central bank, and the debt begins to pile up. And everything's funded through loans, car loans, home loans, business loans, whatever. And the debt piles up until the people finally say, we can't take on any more debt. We're struggling just to pay the debt that we have right now. And it's at that point the Keynesian economists come in and say, oh, well, to keep this little pyramid going, the government has to borrow on behalf of the people. And I might add, without their permission. And that's where you have the government borrowing all this money from the Federal Reserve for bailouts and TARP and all these other programs. And then when the government reaches the point where they can't borrow any more money, and remember, October, the U.S. government has already hit its mandated debt ceiling. They're not talking about it, but they've already hit it. When you reach the point where the government cannot borrow anymore and the people won't borrow anymore, that is when the wars get started. Because the war takes off the limits and the shackles, and the borrowing just goes completely sky high. with nations borrowing tons and tons of money to fight the war. And when the war is over, they have to borrow tons and tons more of money to rebuild after the war. And once that war is over, ordinary people like you and I, we pretty much have what we had before, except the graveyards are a lot bigger. And we're back on hook to the private central banks for another 50 to 100 years. That is the scam. And they got away with it twice before in big mistake number 1 and big mistake number 2. And they're trying to do it again. And we must stop it. The common enemy of all mankind are private central banks issuing the public currency as a loan at interest. We fought a revolution to break free of that system of economic slavery, only to be sold back into it, not once, but 3 times, by a corrupt central government. Now, quick little article looking back, false flags to start a war. The Franco-Prussian War involved a forged telegram called the Ems Dispatch that made it appear the Prussian king had insulted a French ambassador. Lousy reason to go to war, but that was what basically kicked up the Franco-Prussian War. In the Russo-Swedish War, the Swedish king faked an attack on his own country because under that country's constitution, he couldn't declare an offensive war. It had to be defensive. Oh, we've been attacked, and I can send you all off to war. We've seen that one repeated here in the United States of America. We've talked many times about the sinking of the USS Maine. There was no Spanish mine in Havana Harbor. That has been documented by Admiral Hyman G. Rickover. We all know about the Reichstag fire. And by the way, there was an article we had at whatreallyhappened.com, I think yesterday, where they have found even more evidence that the Nazis set the fire themselves to blame on the communists and to rush along the enabling acts to give the Fuhrer emergency powers to deal with the terror crisis. We've talked about the Gleiwitz incident, where Hitler sent his own people, pretending to be Polish terrorists, to attack the radio station at Gleiwitz, Germany, took along a Polish prisoner, shot him, so a Polish body would be found there in the wreckage. And that's how he got Germany to march into Poland, which pretty much kicked off World War II for real. The Winter War. The Red Army shelled Manila, a Russian town near the Finnish border, and blamed Finland for the attack. The Kassa attack, 1941. At the time, it was the city of Kassa was part of Hungary, was bombed by 3 unidentified Hungarian planes, was blamed on the Soviet Union, which allowed Hungary to declare war on the Soviet Union. Operation Ajax was the CIA's operation to oust the democratically elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh and put in the Shah. Operation Northwoods. This was planned but never carried out. This is in 1962. The U.S. Department of Defense came up with a plan to get into war with Cuba by fabricating hijackings of passenger and military planes, sinking a U.S. ship near Cuba and blaming Cuba, and on and on. It was vetoed by President John F. Kennedy, but they were planning it. We all know about the Gulf of Tonkin accident. There were no torpedoes, and it goes on and on and on. Saddam's nuclear weapons. 9/11 was a false flag. Israel's attack on the USS Liberty was a false flag. The Lavon affair was a false flag. This tactic of starting wars is nothing new. It's been business as usual for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. The difference is now the people of planet Earth understand this is how their governments start these wars. It's a dirty trick, and I can think of no higher high crime or misdemeanor than for a government to lie and trick their people into a war of conquest, which is what our government is doing to the people of the United States of America. Now then, story that I wrote actually some time ago, and I reprised it to the front of whatreallyhappened.com, was called Majestic Memories, and it's about Jim Carrey's movie The Majestic. And I resonated with that because most of the movie takes place in this fictional town of Lawton, California, which is still recovering from World War II. And it reminded me so much of the town I grew up in New Hampshire. And I was a kid back then in those post-war years, and for all the talk about, yes, we were great, we won the Great War and everything, for the people of that actual town, they'd been defeated. They'd lost fathers, sons, brothers, husbands. Their financial security had been destroyed because the main breadwinners were lying dead someplace in France and Germany. Nobody wins these things except the bankers. All right, a couple of quick headlines about the economy. Only 169,000 new jobs were created in August. This is sharply down from what was being expected of 180,000 jobs. They've revised July's job numbers down from 162,000 to 104,000, meaning they're inflating the numbers, and then a couple of months later when they think you're not looking, they say, well, it was actually only this. And 85% of the new jobs added last month were minimum wage jobs. We are seeing reports from places like Investment Watch blog. U.S. American incomes for the 99% will continue to fall for the next 30 years. RINF.com is saying the U.S. economic recovery, even if it was possible, would take 30 years, meaning people of my age will never live to see a time of prosperity again in our lives because of these money junkies. And, of course, if they get their global war going, we're probably not even going to live all that long anyway. 1 out of every 7 American families facing food insecurity. But we can spend money on wars of conquest on the other side of the planet. By the way, somebody went back, some historians, and took a look and realized that medieval peasants only worked about half the year because they were into agriculture and growing, and they only worked 150 days a year. And here in the United States of America, we can maybe get 1 week off every year. And by the way, the United States is the only industrialized nation on earth that does not have government-mandated vacation days for the workers. It's work them until they drop and pay them as little as possible. That is the displayed attitude of the government towards you. BRICS has now capitalized its new international currency for their use to the tune of $100 billion. Syria wants to join. Other countries want to join because they want to move away from the U.S. dollar. And yes, Obama's Syria war did get that sort of off the media's radar scope for the G20, but they did talk about it. Back after Phyllis Shapley and commercial with the lovely Lady Claire. America, welcome back to the show. And for those of you watching on BAM User TV, this gorgeous creature back here is the lovely Lady Claire, back after her long hiatus from the microphone in hour number 3 of our shows. And Claire, I know you got a lot of things you want to talk about, so what's your first topic?
Yes, I do. There was a story that I came across in antiwar.com, which indicated that senators who voted Wednesday to authorize a Syria strike received, on average, 83, let me run that number by you again, 83% more campaign financing from defense contractors than lawmakers voting against the war.
Imagine my shock on that. And it's a reminder of something I said yesterday when we were playing all of these little recordings for the Republic Broadcasting fundraiser. The other side is spending hundreds of millions of dollars trying to push this nation into war, and that's why Republic Broadcasting needs your help to stay on the air so we can stand up against them.
Because right now what we're dealing with is a very ugly reality. And that ugly reality is that this country has morphed of a country of the people, by the people, and for the people, into a country of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. And you can consider most congressional representatives as their assets, not as representing you, your concerns, or your needs in any way. Oh, they will occasionally do the town hall meeting, which is becoming a little bit more robust in terms of people talking back to their alleged representatives.
When McCain got hammered. They're going to stop the town hall meetings. I'll make that prediction right now because they're all turning into complete disasters. They can't get any video footage of people standing up and saying, yes, I absolutely support the war in Syria. And by the way, if you go to one of those town hall meetings, take along a printout of that official enlistment form for the U.S. military forces, and if anybody in that town hall meeting stands up and says, yes, I support the war in Syria, just say, here's your enlistment form right there. Fill it out. I'll drop it off at the recruiter on the way out of here.
Absolutely. The next little number I'd like to go to is a number on the economy, and this is reason for sounding the alarm. The number of Americans who are 16 years or older and are not participating in the nation's labor force has pushed back past 90 million. 90 million people not working in the U.S.
Well, Obama has a job for them. Just go on down and sign up and go off to the war. In a way, it's an economic draft. Crush down the economy, take away the jobs from the young people. I remember that time when you and I were going down to the Denny's right next to the recruitment centers.
Yes.
We saw that whole line of people who were getting ready to go off to their Air Force training, and they all said the same thing. I don't want to go in the military, but there are no jobs. It's either this or be homeless.
Yeah.
And so young people are being forced into the military by the economy. So the government can say, hey, they volunteered. It's not really a draft. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And it's just, I shudder to think of how many of these young kids are going to be killed or crippled or addicted to SSRIs and PTSD and all the rest of that just so the bankers can go on playing their games. It just infuriates me. And I'm trying not to actually lose my temper and freak out here on the air. But I'm really, really close to just an open rage here.
And the other question I think that we need to ask is why Obama at the G20 refused to give a direct response on Syrian action without congressional approval. In other words, will he do it without congressional approval?
Well, certainly the assets are already in the place here, and I know that Obama would like to see congressional approval to give his war a sense of legitimacy, at least under the U.S. War Powers Act. But at this point, everybody on the planet knows the cause for going to war is just an absolute, complete fabrication from beginning to end. And so this war definitely is not legitimate, and we have to oppose it. We have to oppose it any way that we can. Gum up the system. We have to stop this.
Yes.
Because it's going to end in a nuclear war.
Yes. And you touched earlier on the concept of the false flag. And I've noticed that President Obama has decided to make his address to the nation for the war against Syria on Tuesday, which is the eve of, drumroll, 9/11. Now, what I think is going to happen is he's going to take a look at the overnights, and he is going to do one of a couple of things. There are three possibilities here, and I don't think that there are any more. There may be more, but there are only three that present themselves to me. One is that he will use this as an escape hatch to tamper down the war talk and will take some of those assets out of the area of the Mediterranean, strategically positioned. The other is that he will start the war without any congressional approval or American citizen approval, or that there will be some kind of false flag, and of course the timing of such a thing happening on 9/11. I mean, I would not discount that right now.
No, I think that is actually the most likely scenario. Maybe not on 9/11 or the eve of 9/11, but at this point, given the overwhelming opposition to this latest U.S. aggression by the American people and the people of planet Earth, I'd say false flag is the most likely tactic they're going to employ next. And again, last Tuesday, Israel tried. They fired those missiles at Syria, hoping to goad Assad into an overt military act against the U.S. warships, which would have then immediately opened up the gateway to a larger war. And again, we're already seeing the propaganda in the corporate media about Iran is going to carry out terror attacks, Iran is going to attack Israel. They're already selling expansion of the war on Syria into Iran. They're going for the whole thing, and it's going to end badly for this nation.
And an observation I'd like to share with our audience, Mike. Cornered animals and cornered governments are very dangerous. And we right now, unfortunately, are living with a cornered U.S. government at the moment. Obama cannot seem to staunch the bleeding from self-inflicted wounds of this administration, which include Benghazi Gate, IRS Gate, AP Gate, Obamacare Gate, and NSA Gate. The U.S. government is broke to the tune of trillions upon trillions of dollars. The economy continues to be on the ropes, with more of what used to stabilize the middle class in terms of jobs getting offshored and outsourced by the minute. The value of the U.S. dollar has been absolutely destroyed by the quantitative easing policy of the Fed, and it means that all those people who did save diligently for their retirement, they're in deep kimchi right now. They're in deep trouble.
And of course, Social Security, all of that cash surplus built up for the baby boomer retirements has been borrowed away and replaced with Treasury bonds that the government cannot repay. And that's something all of you need to be paying attention to right now. Officially, the government acknowledges a $16 trillion debt, and they're already talking about a debate. We got to raise the debt ceiling because we got to go to war. Other economists are saying when you bring in all of the off-book obligations and expenditures, the U.S. government debt is actually above $70 trillion. That's 70. And according to a report that we found in NPR from a year and a half ago, they put the true scale of U.S. government debt at well over $220 trillion, and that works out to $1 million for every single American family. And it is inescapable. It doesn't matter how hard you work, how much you sacrifice, the debt can't be paid. They will just drive you down to dirt poverty, trying to keep the system ticking along a little bit longer and dump the bill on your children and your grandchildren. And because they go on borrowing and spending more than they're taking in, they're not reducing the debt at all.
Oh, no, just the converse.
You know, I mean, they'll save a few bucks by not voting through any aid for the Hurricane Sandy victims, but you've got McCain and Lindsey Graham already out there saying, oh, yeah, billions for war in Syria, and then they back off because the taxpayers are saying, we don't have it, and we don't have the money for these taxes anymore. And let me finish this off because we're coming from a commercial break here, okay? And, you know, they want to just go on spending this money, and all of it will be borrowed, and our future generations will be forced to pay it back. And that is the scam here. Wars do not make the economy work better. There's the illusion of prosperity from all the borrowed cash during the war, and then generations of people have to sacrifice and work to pay it back, plus interest. Enough is enough is enough. We've got to take a break for commercials. Back with Claire after these words from our sponsor. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And before we go back to the Lady Claire, we got a couple of phone calls we need to get to. Dave in Niagara Falls. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha, Mike. Aloha, Claire.
Aloha.
Claire, you were talking about false flags in the last segment. That's kind of what I want to mention. I would look at the same comments sections of mainstream news. I'm sure you two do, and I've noticed the last couple of weeks people are actually accepting this concept, and they're talking about Al Qaeda in Syria. And, people are finally getting it, and I've got to wonder if we might see the light at the end of the tunnel here, and might be close to defeating the enemy, if you know what I mean.
Michael, how would you like to respond?
I was actually trading some stuff with our control room technician, and I have to confess I wasn't paying attention. There's only so much, Michael, to go on.
I would like to hope, in the best possible scenario I see, I don't know how likely it is, but that Obama uses the no-confidence vote from Congress. I don't think this legislation is going to pass on Syria as an exit strategy. But there is so much push and so much pressure by AIPAC, by Israel, etc., and of course by the financial institutions and those institutions that profit from war, like the military-industrial complex.
Yes.
I don't know. It's difficult to say.
Well, Obama, I'm convinced, is building his escape hatch with his, first of all, by putting the decision onto Congress, and then by saying it wasn't his red line. But I don't think he's decided he needs it. He just wants to have it on standby, and very clearly they're moving forward with this war agenda. His speech on Tuesday night is going to be yet another attempt to convince the American people. And they may just simply look at the overnight poll results following Obama's speech and see where the public support for this whole thing is, and they're push polling as hard as they can, trying to create the illusion that public support for the war in Syria is growing. They're playing every single dirty trick they can think of trying to get this thing going, and that's why it is so important for you every single day. Call the Capitol Hill, talk to the offices of your senators and your representative, and even though you've called before, they're probably not going to remember it was you, but just talk to those staffers and say, no, heck no, darn no, what part of no do you not understand? And at some point, I would hope prudent heads within the United States government and the Pentagon would understand that trying to start a war without the support and faith of the American people, and especially without the support and faith of the rank-and-file military themselves, means they are going to lose. And relying on their wonder weapons to carry them through is exactly the same strategic mistake that Adolf Hitler made at the end of World War II, when he thought the V1 and the V2 were going to win the war, and all it did was harden resolve against him.
And what American citizens need to do, what Rivero's Rangers need to do, get on your keyboards, get on your phones, talk to people. Talk to people and your representatives, and see if you can possibly get them to commit to be completely opposed to this.
Okay, absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, keep up the pressure. The side that quits first is going to lose this thing. And again, sadly, the wild card is Israel, because congressional debate and public support and everything will be moot. If Israel can stage a false flag attack that makes it look like Syria attacked our warships, it'll be off and running. They are desperate to get this war going because they believe it's going to fix all their economic problems, and it doesn't. It just shoves the economic problems onto future generations. And those of you with children, or those of you planning on having families, need to look around at the state of the nation today and say, is this the nation I want my children to have to live in? And think very hard about it. That you could, by staying silent, by staying inactive, you condemn your children to future slavery to those private central banks. Are you willing to live with that? Okay? We're going to take another phone call here. Bob in Virginia. Aloha, Bob. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I guess you've been hearing about these possible nukes that are missing. Do you think it's a possibility that they're going to do a false flag here in conjunction with the attack on Syria to cause martial law?
I don't know about martial law, but again, we're already seeing the propaganda coming out in the corporate media that when Syria is attacked, Iran is going to carry out terror attacks in the United States of America, and obviously if they use a nuclear weapon, then they can say, aha, we were right all along, Iran had secret clandestine nuclear weapons. And again, while we know that Iran will support Syria in this coming war, why would Iran carry out an overt act of terror in the United States of America knowing that it opens the door for a direct attack by the United States? They're still trying to sell this whole lie that all of these other foreign leaders are incredible morons who don't understand the consequences of their actions. And we understand that that is a lie. Israel's the wild card. Israel has a long history of dirty tricks to achieve their political ends. British intelligence finally admitted a while back that Israel's own intelligence agencies set up the hijacking that led to the raid on Entebbe that made Israel look good and the Palestinians look bad. We know about the Lavon affair. We know about the attack on the USS Liberty. I'm convinced the USS Cole was more of the same. Viktor Ostrovsky, in his book By Way of Deception, tells about how Israel smuggled a radio transmitter into Tripoli and sent out bogus messages making it look like Gaddafi was ordering terror attacks around the world that tricked Ronald Reagan into bombing Libya. This is what they do. And they tried to do it on Tuesday with these missiles fired towards Syria, and just because they failed doesn't mean they're not already thinking of something else to do.
Do you think they try to do something here on U.S. soil?
Probably. They already did, 9/11.
Do you think they do another one on this 9/11?
Yes. May not be on 9/11, but Israel will not hesitate to carry out a false flag attack somewhere here in the United States of America if they think it will move this war agenda forward.
And the timing of Obama's speech to the nation on Tuesday, the eve of 9/11, pregnant with possibilities. That's
I'd like to know who told Lindsey Graham that there could be an attack on Charleston Harbor. Has anybody heard that?
Oh, yes, we have heard that. And that, to me, was unconscionable, to scare his own constituents in that way. But what he may have done in his Orwellian threat-mongering statement, he may have tipped the hand about what might be planned if the overnight polls are not positive from Obama's speech to the nation on Tuesday.
Could very well be. Anything is possible, and that's something we all need to be talking about with our friends and neighbors. At this point, there is nothing the United States and Israeli governments will not do to move the war agenda forward. False flags are a common feature throughout history. Our own government has done them. Israel has done them. And as Claire said earlier in this hour, they are feeling desperate and cornered. They understand that if they don't get this war going, the U.S. economy is going to collapse, and Wall Street and Washington, D.C. will be blamed for that by the American people and the people of the entire world. So they need this war as a distraction because, hey, at least the media isn't talking about Benghazi and IRS harassment of political dissidents and NSA spying on us all anymore. Hey, that's off the media scope. There's a good reason to risk a nuclear war. But, here in the independent media, we're still covering all of that stuff. And I think most Americans are still very much aware of it. Americans are now looking around. They know they were lied to about Saddam's nuclear weapons. They know they're being lied to about serious chemical weapons. Now they're looking at everything they were ever told by the government and the corporate media with very skeptical eyes, and they are open to the idea that they were lied to about all kinds of stuff. They're receptive. They're ready to listen and understand this is what's going on. Bob, we got to let you go here. Going to try and sneak in one more phone call. Pat in Las Vegas, what's on your mind?
Hi.
Hi.
One comment I wanted to make. There was an interview by Leslie Stahl of Madeleine Albright on 60 Minutes.
Pat, I apologize. Pat, I apologize. We got to take a commercial break. Stay on the phone. I'm going to come to you as soon as we're back from these commercials. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Pat in Las Vegas, please continue.
I was saying that Leslie Stahl interviewed Madeleine Albright on 60 Minutes and asked her about the 500,000 children killed in Bosnia.
Mm-hmm.
And her reply was, in war, there's collateral damage. So when we do it, it's collateral damage. Anybody else does it, it's murder.
Well, you know, it's kind of interesting because the latest propaganda coming out to support the war in Syria is that Assad is deliberately torturing children. You know, next it's going to be he's abusing puppy dogs. He's tearing the wings off of butterflies, you know, and they're just scrambling around for that. Pat, thanks for the call. And before I take the next phone call, I feel it's time to make a statement here. Because I know a lot of Americans are out there still we're trying to be law-abiding, we're trying to go on and on with what we're doing here. But the reality is, just because the government says something is the law, first of all, they could be lying, which we know this government does. And second of all, remember that everything the Nazis did in Germany was the letter of the law. Did that make it right? Were the German people right to support the Nazis just because they claimed the imprimatur of the letter of the law? And the answer, of course, is no. There comes a time when you have to say, this government is illegitimate, its laws are illegitimate, and it's just a big scam to just get these wars going for the bankers. Back to the phones. BJ in Arizona, Aloha Beach. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike and Claire.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi. Every time that they have ever wanted the Congress to vote on a certain thing, they pull something out of their black bag, and I think this nuke thing is that. We don't even know it's true. They're probably just making it up because Lindsey Graham, I don't know if you saw that clip of him.
Oh, I sure did.
What a joke. I mean, tell us how you found out. I mean, if it's a black op, that was awful sloppy. How did you find out?
Yeah, I hear you.
Where's the South Carolina thing coming from? I don't understand. All I know is that they lie when they open their mouth, and if it's out in the open, I mean, that would be something our government would want to try to hide if they found out that somebody was able to move one of their nukes.
You're absolutely right there, but they're trying to create a public panic. And by the way, Lindsey Graham did try and link this threat to Iran. Saying that Iran is going to give their nuclear weapons to terrorists, and the terrorists are going to bring them in here and set them off. Yeah, they're already, they understand this is the last time they're going to be able to get a war going over the objection of the American people, maybe. So they're going for it all. Syria, Iran, whoever else is on their list, they're just going to go for it. And we're going to wind up at war with Russia and China to prop up these little...
Why do they even care what we think? I mean, you know, he's going to put,
we have to make them
in and see how we feel. What a joke. They don't care what we think.
We have to make them care what we think because this is our country. It says right at the top of the Constitution, we the people. And if they're not going to do their job and abide by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, it's time to fire them. And it's time to say, we don't recognize you as a legitimate legal government of this land any longer. We recognize you've got the guns to shoot those of us complaining, but that doesn't make you legitimate or legal either.
Well, what you were saying about the letter of the law and all this, you know, Lindsey Graham was saying, well, because Obama already said that there was this red line, now we have to go in and kill a whole bunch of people. So, because we just look so horrible if we don't keep our word and our threat.
I cannot think of a more nonsensical excuse to go to war. We have to go to war to prove that we keep our promise. I mean, there's desperation on the cusp of madness.
Oh, it's so sickening, and I didn't know. I'm just now reading there's 7 million people uprooted over there, 5 million displaced, and 2 million have left the country already.
And many of them are Christian families who have been forcibly displaced if they haven't been killed outright. And these mercs who we are supporting, who are called allegedly the rebels, most of them aren't even Syria. They've been trained, they've been hired, and they have been paid by the West. And
who
so
wants to get rid of Christians? That tells you a lot just right there.
It's a head-scratching moment, I got to tell you.
Yeah, why is our government supporting these people who are carrying out these atrocities? I mean, more and more videos are surfacing of decapitations, shooting of children, and yet they're still out there saying, oh, we've got to get rid of Assad, we've got to... It's complete nonsense, and most people recognize it's nonsense. That's why there's this huge public outcry against this war. We're seeing it in these town hall meetings, which I don't expect to last much longer. And the government's attitude is, we already said we're going to war, so we're going to go to war with Syria, and don't bother us with the facts because we can't back down. And it is such a dangerous situation. Beach, got to let you go. We're running out of time. I've got to take a phone call from Nathan in California. Nathan, you're going to be our last phone call because Claire's got a few more things she wants to say.
Okay, Michael, real quick, I'll call you on Monday on this. Hi, Claire, and great show. One very, very quick thing, and I'll get off the line. I firmly believe that to make a short, work of this whole problem, if it gets going, I think that the Russians are going to vaporize Israel, and I don't give that country a very good chance of survival. So for all the people in Israel that think that this is going to be, no big deal or whatever, my advice to them is do not put your gas masks on. When these bombs go off, about 40 megatons will vaporize and set 6,000 square miles on fire. If you have a gas mask on in Israel, that thing's going to melt onto your face, and that's a horrible way to go.
All right, well, I don't want to get into the gory details here, and...
weapons do, Michael. Anyway, I'll maybe talk to you next week. Have a great weekend.
Give me a call on Monday if we're still here. And let me just finish up here on this. I rather doubt Russia would do something that overt, given how Israel's minions in this country would demand an immediate retaliatory counterattack. But it's not beyond the realm of possibility. Putin understands very clearly how our government has been co-opted by Israel, and were he to immediately vaporize not all of Israel, which is only half the size of New Jersey, but Tel Aviv and the main government and military centers, and then it would say to the United States, are you willing to go to a nuclear exchange over a government that doesn't exist anymore anyway? And that would be real brinksmanship, but Putin could back the United States down pretty much the way Kennedy backed Khrushchev down over the Cuban Missile Crisis. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility. I think it would be very reckless and dangerous, but the potential for this situation to spin completely out of control is there, and the money junkies don't care. All they see is that, we get to plunge America and the rest of the world back into another 100 years of debt, and it's worth risking nuclear Armageddon to do that, because they've already got their bomb shelters, all over the place. They're going to, if they make a mistake and it goes nuclear, they're just going to go on down to those little underground bunkers that you paid for but will not be allowed to go into. And it's insanity. This is a time of incredible insanity by the government of the United States of America. And the last bastion to stop this is the American people, and that's you. And through the weekend into next week, just keep ringing the phones of your members of Congress, especially the House of Representatives. Keep talking to everybody you know, especially those who are not on the Internet, getting to the independent media, and just bring them up to date on what's going on and get them to call their members of Congress. We have to fight this down right to the wire. Because, as we reported earlier in the show, the defense contractors are showering money all over Congress to get a Syria vote. AIPAC is in there showering money or reminding people about blackmailable offenses to get the war vote on Syria. It's a full court press to force this thing through. It's up to us to force it backward. It's down to you. It's down to all of you listening to this show to just keep up the pressure to stop this insanity. And even if we can't stop the insanity, the United States is going to go into a war with the entire world knowing that we, the American people, did not agree to this, do not support it, do not believe the lies about Syria. We can take away from them the illusion of some kind of a public mandate or moral authority. That's what we have to do. All right, Claire, what was your next topic?
Well, the next topics are interrelated, and they're a little bit light in the face of all the darkness we are facing. I read this morning that Iran's foreign minister on Facebook condemned the Holocaust. We condemn the massacre of Jews by the Nazis, and we condemn the massacre of Palestinians by the Zionists. This guy is Mohammed Javad Zaif, and he wrote it on Facebook, and he also gave New Year's greetings to the Jewish community. And he was asked whether he wished Jews happy Rosh Hashanah, and had an exchange about the Holocaust on Twitter with the daughter of Pelosi, Christine Pelosi. And she said, "Thanks, the new year would be even sweeter if you would end Iran's Holocaust denials, sir," she wrote.
Oh, boy.
And
okay, we got to take a
okay.
break for commercials.
All right.
We'll be right back after these words. So, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. This is our last segment on our Friday show. And I got to tell you, going into this weekend is one of the very few times I have regretted not having a Saturday or Sunday show here on RBN because of all that's going on. But again, just to sum up what's going on, the bankers have reached the point where the only way they can resolve the inherent flaws in private central banking is to get another world war going. Why? Because it worked twice before. They're pushing as hard as they can. The corporate media is just feeding the propaganda. And it's a full court press. They will, by golly, whatever it takes, get us into World War III for real. There's going to be a big bang that'll be the new Pearl Harbor or the new sinking of the Lusitania, both of which were false flags, we found out. Roosevelt knew the Japanese were coming. Roosevelt goaded the Japanese into it. We were talking about the Lusitania yesterday. They were carrying war material on that passenger liner, which made it a legitimate target. Oh, they were innocent passengers, the bad Germans. This is how these wars get started, and they're trying to do it again. And the only one who can stop it is you listening to this show right now. And you've heard me say this several times before, and I'm going to repeat it as we head into the end of the show. This is up to you. We are down to the wire about whether this world war is going to go into a truly global conflict, risking nuclear weapons. And you have to keep the pressure up on the Congress. You can't back down. And you need to share what you know about the lies used to start this war and the last one and the one before and the one before with all of your friends and neighbors who may not be internet savvy, who may not be plugged into the independent media. And you need to get them to call their representatives. And yes, either through a false flag or Obama simply saying, "I'm going to go anyway just to prove that I keep my word." They may have the war anyway, but we can take away the illusion of moral rightness from this government. It's already standing exposed to the world as a rogue government that does not listen to or respect the American people, does not respect international law. And we can take that away from them. And remember what Sun Tzu said about the army with the moral law on their side is the army that wins. All right, we have a pledge drive promo we're going to play real quick before I wrap up today.
Hi, this is Gerald Salenti, publisher of the Trends Journal and director of the Trends Research Institute. I enjoy being on with John Stadmiller every month because I believe in what RBN is doing. It's helping to let freedom ring. And to make sure it keeps ringing and it rings louder, I urge you all to consider donating to RBN to keep their voice ringing loud so that more people could tune in, hear it, and freedom and liberty could come back to America. So it's up to you. It's either more of the same or the next American Revolution. Go to republicbroadcasting.org and consider giving as much as you can, as often as you can. This is Gerald Salenti. The future lies in your hands.
He's absolutely right about that. The future lies in your hand. And yes, it is down to a choice of allowing things to continue as they are, which is getting worse, and condemn your children to servitude to the bankers, or it's time for a new American Revolution. And we need to start making our decisions and be willing to accept what those decisions will absolutely mean. Because they're taking us into another world war to resolve the problems with private central banking's little Ponzi scheme. That's the motive here. And again, look at how much money the defense lobbyists are showering all over Congress, hundreds of millions of dollars. AIPAC is going into Congress with hundreds of millions of dollars, and what's really sick about it is they're getting that money from you. Israel gets money from the American taxpayer that they turn around and send back into Congress to buy Israel's will with your money. That is how sick and twisted this whole system is. They're using your money against you. And that is not what the U.S. government is supposed to do. The U.S. government is supposed to take your money and spend it to take care of you. Bridges, schools, hospitals, Social Security, assistance for people who, for one reason or another, are unable to take care of themselves. That's what we, the people, agreed to pay taxes for. Not endless war across the globe, you know, in compliance with the Project for the New American Century, which was this pro-Israel neocon organization back in the 1990s that put us on this war path. And I'm opposed to war. I'm opposed to war just for a bank balance. And I'm opposed to this war because ultimately the United States is going to lose it. And those who are behind this war, the private central banks, they don't care. They absolutely do not care that this country could lose this war. They absolutely do not care how many hundreds of millions of human beings are going to be sent to death and disfigurement by these wars. Oh, it's collateral damage. And I think coming out of current events, if there's one thing I'd like future generations to learn from current events, is just how evil all large governments tend to be over time. Because this nation was started with the best of intentions, with a great constitution that distributed the power to minimize the effects of corruption, with protections for the people, with limits on the government to keep it focused on taking care of this nation. And almost at once, the money junkies started working to corrupt it, starting with Alexander Hamilton. And here we are today. Take a look around this weekend as you walk around. Look at the deteriorated state of our nation. Look at all the homeless and hungry. And ask yourself if this government, if this financial system is working for the American people. And I'm sure you're going to agree with me. No, it isn't working for the people. It's working for the war hawks. It's working for Wall Street and Israel and the 1%. It does not work for you. And at some point, you're going to have to take a stand and say, no more. I have nothing left to lose by standing up and saying I refuse to recognize this government's legitimacy any longer. And I'm sorry if I don't seem to be in a really good mood today, but I have been doing this, WhatReallyHappened.com, and its former incarnations, Rancho Run Amok and the rest of it, for going on 20 years, almost the entire time I've been married to this lovely young lady. And this certainly isn't the life that I wanted to provide her as a loving husband. And I feel very, very bad about that. But it's been almost 20 years now. And remember, I didn't start this fight. All I did was try and call attention to a murder. And it put me on this path. And the longer I have looked at what's going on, the more I've come to understand the true nature of this government. And it is not what was intended by the Founding Fathers. It is not what all those who died in previous American wars thought they were supporting. The United States of America has mutated, metastasized into one of the most evil governments in all of history. And the evil is continuing right before your eyes. And you have to take a stand to stop it. By supporting Republic Broadcasting, by calling your members of Congress, by screaming to anybody who will listen to it, we are on a wrong path that is leading to the destruction of this nation. As Gerald Celente said, it all comes down to you. The future is in your hands. It's in your keyboards, it's in your fax machines, it's in your phones. You cannot stay silent. You cannot stay inactive without handing victory to the other side. The first side that quits is going to lose. That's really what it comes down to. Obama's going to try and resell the war next Tuesday. Between now and then, you have to just Enlighten everybody you know of the absurdity of this idea that Assad would invite in UN chemical weapons inspectors and then launch a chemical weapon attack right in front of them on women and children. It doesn't make sense when you think about it. And nobody can come up with a motive why Assad would do something that stupid when it serves no military purpose, no political purpose. It is a lie. It's another in a long line of lies to sell you a war. Please don't buy it. Please help educate your friends and neighbors that it is a lie. It's up to you. Have a good weekend. I hope they don't just haul off and carry out the attack over the weekend. I don't know what's going to go on. Anything is possible, including false flags. So have a good weekend. Stay safe. Stay angry. And aloha, America.